In a far future, different alien species watch battle footage from Earth and are shocked by the fierce courage and strange ways humans fight. The footage shows soldiers fighting against impossible odds with wild bravery and strange tools. Unbeknownst to them, a quiet human veteran sits among them, Calvin Marshall, who lived through those brutal battles. As danger returns in the form of space pirates, Marshall must protect his bar and the people around him, using his deadly skills learned in war. The story is full of tension, bravery, and the heavy price of survival. The hollow slate flickered with images of a burning battlefield. On the screen, a soldier ran through fire and smoke. Half of his armor was missing, flames licking his chest. His face was dirty with mud and blood, and his eyes burned with fury. He held a sharp piece of metal like a weapon, cutting through enemies without care. Around him, explosions lit the dark jungle like deadly fireworks. Croc, a giant Tharvan mercenary with gray stone skin and large tusks, slammed his fist on the table holding the screen. Drinks spilled everywhere, and a bowl of fermented grubs fell to the floor. "Pause it. Look at that lunatic." Croc growled, eyes wide. The others in the room leaned closer, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The room was a rough bar on Talora 9, a station at the edge of known space. It was filled with mercenaries, pilots, and soldiers of many species. They had all seen war, but this footage was different. It showed a small group of humans fighting with impossible courage against an overwhelming enemy. Yila, a four-eyed Salvari pilot, whispered, "Resume playback." Her voice was soft but firm. The burning soldier dove through a wall of plasma fire. The attack should have killed him, but he rolled and kept moving. With his makeshift blade, he cut an important part of a hovering gun platform. The platform crashed down, killing 2 enemy soldiers. Then the soldier grabbed a rifle from a fallen enemy and emptied its power cell, laughing as he fought. "Motherless void," breathed Dickon, an Arisian with tall antlers that stood on end. "He's enjoying this. The human is actually enjoying combat." Sectum, a scarred Feiner mercenary nursing a drink, growled, "That's not combat. He's just insane. Maybe on drugs." He took a long sip. "Do they even still make that primitive drug?" "No," said Yila. "The commentary says it's about their biology, not drugs." Calvin Marshall stood behind the bar, quietly polishing glasses. His eyes, the color of strong coffee, never left the screen. He knew every detail. He had been there. "Adrenaline, endorphins, and pure spite," Marshall said softly when asked. "Humans run on anger and will. When pushed hard enough, the body stops asking for permission. It just moves." The room fell silent. That was his squad on the screen. The Wendigo unit. The ghost squad that never left a man behind. The stories were famous, even among aliens. They held Thermopylae Station against thousands, with just a handful of soldiers and whatever weapons they could find. Marshall's voice was calm but carried weight. "We lost a lot of good people. We fought every day like it was our last." The footage shifted to aerial views. The jungle was on fire. The enemy had called in orbital strikes. The ground was glass, burning and cracked. The humans hid in mud and rivers. They moved like ghosts through the smoke and flames. Rickon, a scientific mind in the room, shook his head. "It should have been impossible. We were just getting angry," Marshall said. "That's all." The fight turned from defense to hunting. The enemy began disappearing, their numbers falling. The humans took what they needed to survive: water, weapons, anything. A young pilot raised his hand, trembling. "Did you really make the enemy's colonel call a retreat?" Marshall looked at him, eyes sharp. "Yeah. I did. I lied to him in a game of cards. Said I had a better hand than I did. He believed me and pulled his troops back. Left us the supplies we needed." The bar erupted in disbelief and cheers. The stories kept flowing. The wounds, the losses, the laughter born from pain. It was madness, but it worked. Suddenly, the bar's door exploded inward. The Thunder Blades, a ruthless gang of pirates, stormed in. Guns flashed, cybernetic limbs glinting in the neon light. Marshall didn't flinch. He set down the glass he was polishing and met their leader's glare. Protection fees just went up, the pirate growled, smashing a rare bottle against the wall. Marshall's eyes twitched. That was a 2387 vintage, he said quietly. The pirate laughed and knocked over shelves. Chaos exploded in the bar. But Marshall moved with a deadly calm. In one smooth motion, he threw the glass in the pirate's face, then twisted a plasma rifle away from another attacker, turning the weapon against them. His knee slammed into an enemy's ribs, breaking bones like twigs. The pirates fired, but Marshall used a fire extinguisher like a shield. "Yeela," he barked. "Southwest corner, emergency kit. Flare gun." The pilot threw him the flare gun without hesitation. Marshall fired into a puddle of spilled alcohol. Blue-white flames roared up, sending two pirates screaming and crashing through tables. He charged through the fire, driving a pirate into the wall. Armor cracked, ribs shattered. When the gunfire stopped, Marshall was the last standing. He caught a breaching charge, a deadly explosive, just before it hit the floor and slapped it onto the pirate leader's chest plate. 3 seconds, he said cheerfully. The leader stumbled, running for the door. The explosion was loud but contained, blowing the leader away and tearing down part of the bar's entrance. Marshall snapped bones of fallen pirates with quiet efficiency. His eyes never lost their calm, deadly focus. Grenades bounced harmlessly off walls, and Marshall's quick reflexes redirected one back into the enemy. 2 pirates surrendered, numb from nerve strikes. "You'll pay for the damages," Marshall said, voice cold. "Starting with that bottle." The last pirate begged for mercy. Marshall lifted him and whispered threats so sharp the kid nodded like a beaten dog. Soon peacekeepers arrived, shocked by the scene. Even they saluted Marshall with respect. As calm returned, Marshall poured drinks and listened to tales from the bar. Stories of human stubbornness, endurance, and strange bravery that no alien fully understood. A young pilot asked for advice on working with humans. Marshall's answer was simple: feed them, let them sleep, and beware when they laugh in battle. It meant they had stopped caring for everything except survival and their comrades. Late that night, Marshall sat alone, staring at the cracked hollow slate. The war footage haunted him, but so did the memory of his squad, 30 soldiers against impossible odds, still alive. He whispered to the empty bar, "You magnificent bastards. We actually made it." Then he wiped the screen clean, turned off the lights, and prepared for whatever came next. The bar was quieter the next day. Talora 9's neon lights cast long shadows across the walls, and the smell of burnt alcohol still lingered in the air. Calvin Marshall moved behind the counter with practiced ease, polishing glasses and arranging bottles. His hands worked smoothly, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying the night's fight, the strange mix of fear and respect he had seen in the eyes of the mercenaries. Word had spread fast. The Thunder Blades wouldn't forget what happened, nor would anyone else. The bar now had a reputation, safe under the watch of a human warrior with a deadly past. Some patrons nodded at him with quiet thanks, others kept their distance, unsure if they should fear or admire the man behind the counter. Grit, the bar's 4-armed owner, approached nervously. "Marshall, I got something to show you," he said, shifting from foot to foot. "Look at this." He pointed to a small glass jar at the end of the bar with a handwritten sign, "Bar Repair Fund, not tax deductible." The jar was stuffed with credits, small chips, military paychecks, and a few thick bundles of bills. Marshall frowned. "What the hell is this?" "The regulars started it," Grit said, shrugging. "They say it's not right for you to pay for all the damage by yourself. You protect us, but you take the cost. Marshall shook his head. I don't need charity. Yila, leaning nearby, smiled softly. It's not charity. It's an investment. You keep us safe. We want to keep drinking here without worry. Croc raised his glass. To the bartender who keeps the peace. And his terrible insurance premiums. Laughter rippled through the bar. Marshall was quiet for a moment, processing the kindness from strangers, aliens who had become something like friends. He cleared his throat. All right, he said gruffly. But I'm keeping track. Everyone who puts money in gets a discount on their drinks until it's paid back. Deal, Grit said quickly. As the night wore on, more credits filled the jar. Dock workers, peacekeepers, and merchants all chipped in. It was a small community effort, born from respect and gratitude. Near closing time, the bar emptied except for Marshall. He counted the credits, amazed. It was more than enough for repairs, maybe even upgrades. A young human woman stepped up to the bar. She was in her mid-20s, wearing pilot's gear. You're Marshall, she asked quietly. I pour drinks. That's all. She slid a credit chip across the bar. This is for the repairs. Military issue. 10,000 credits. Marshall raised an eyebrow. Too much. My brother was at Titan Station, she said, voice steady but eyes moist. Your unit held the evacuation corridor for 6 hours after command wrote you off. He made it because of you. For a long moment, Marshall was silent. Then he said, we lost 3 good people holding that line, saved 300. She turned to leave but paused. I named my daughter after your medic. The one who stayed behind to help the others. Marshall nodded slowly. Angel. The woman smiled faintly and walked away without another word. Marshall looked down at the jar again, full of credits and memories. Somehow, this bar in the middle of nowhere had become home. The next morning, the bar was still recovering. The new door had been installed, and the walls were patched. Marshall had started adding reinforcements, stronger metal plates, better locks, and furniture that could survive another fight. The regulars talked quietly in small groups, but their eyes kept drifting to Marshall. He was a ghost from a war none of them fully understood, a reminder of how brutal survival could be. Rickon, the scientist, approached him one evening. Tell me again about the Green Inferno, he asked, eyes wide with curiosity. Marshall sighed. You want the truth or the legend? Rickon grinned. Truth, please. Marshall recounted the 6 days of fighting in the jungle, no supplies, surrounded, outnumbered. How they fought with whatever they could scavenge, using mud and rivers to hide, turning desperation into a weapon. He spoke of the losses, the exhaustion, the moments when hope seemed gone. But most of all, he spoke of the stubborn refusal to quit, the loyalty to each other that made them dangerous. You fought against all odds, Rickon said softly. We didn't have a choice, Marshall replied. We fought because if we stopped, no one else would come home. One quiet evening, Yila approached the bar. Can I ask you something? Not about the war, about after. Marshall looked up, wiping a glass with a rag. Go ahead. How do you do it? She asked. Go from that, the fighting, the chaos, to this? Pouring drinks, living a normal life. Marshall's eyes darkened for a moment. Who says this is normal? She smiled sadly. It looks peaceful here. He shook his head. It's not retirement. It's a different kind of patrol. Out there, you fight to survive. Here, you fight to protect a quiet peace. It's better than the alternative, going home and pretending you're the same person. He sighed deeply. At least here, nobody expects more than what I am. A bartender who's good at his job. Yila nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. We all are. Marshall smiled, a sharp, honest smile. Good. Terror keeps people polite. Together, they flipped tables back upright and cleaned the bar. The normal fight started again, over money, insults, old grudges, but Marshall stopped them with a look or a word. His presence was enough. Late that night, after the last customer left, Marshall sat alone behind the bar. The hollow slate was still open, showing thumbnails of battle footage, Titan Station, New Kolkata, Thermopylae. Memories crowded in. He picked up the slate to delete the files but stopped. Instead, he opened a different image, 30 exhausted soldiers in mud-stained uniforms, grinning like they just won the lottery. Wendigo Unit. Green Inferno. Day 7. He whispered, "You magnificent bastards. We actually made it." He allowed himself a brief moment of warmth, memories of terrible jokes, a lost friend singing, a promise kept to never leave a man behind. Then he deleted the file, turned off the lights, and locked up. Tomorrow, he would pour more drinks, face more trouble, and protect his little corner of the galaxy. But tonight, he remembered why he fought so hard, not for glory or medals, but for the chance to see another sunrise, even if it was just the artificial dawn of a space station on the edge of nowhere. The days passed slowly on Talora 9, but the threat of the Fenner blades loomed like a dark cloud. The pirates were bruised but not broken, and their anger burned hotter than ever. Marshall knew it was only a matter of time before they tried to strike again. But this time, he was ready. The bar had changed. It was no longer just a place to drink and unwind. It was a fortress, reinforced walls, hidden exits, and a layout that gave Marshall full sight of every entrance. Grit had installed new security systems, and even the peacekeepers had started making regular visits, drawn by the promise of safety. Marshall watched from behind the bar as the usual crowd gathered. Aliens from every corner of space, wary but curious, came to see the man who fought pirates like he fought wars. Some whispered legends about Wendigo Unit. Others told their own stories of survival and loss, finding comfort in shared pain. One evening, a newcomer arrived, a tall woman in sleek pilot armor, her sharp eyes scanning the room. She walked to the bar and ordered a drink in perfect galactic standard. Marshall noticed the faint tremor in her hands, the way she clutched the glass like it was a lifeline. "You look like you've seen a fight," Marshall said quietly as he poured her a drink. She nodded. "I flew missions on Titan Station. Lost more friends than I can count." Marshall poured another drink, sliding it toward her. "Then you know what it means to survive." The woman smiled faintly. "I heard about Wendigo. Your squad saved my crew." Marshall's eyes softened. "We did what we had to. And sometimes, that means doing things people don't understand." She took a sip, eyes meeting his. "I'm Ava. I want to join you." Marshall raised an eyebrow. "Join me? This isn't a squad anymore. It's a bar." Ava smiled, but it wasn't a joke. "I'm not here for drinks. I'm here to fight the pirates. They're getting bolder. They won't stop with you." The bar fell silent. The weight of her words pressed on everyone. The Fenner blades were a threat to all who lived and worked on Talora 9. Marshall studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "All right. But this isn't a war zone anymore. We fight smart. We protect people." Ava's eyes shone with determination. "I understand." The next days were filled with preparation. Marshall and Ava worked together, training the bar's regulars, the merchants, pilots, and peacekeepers, teaching them to defend themselves. The bar became a school of survival, a place where the desperate learned to fight like predators. Marshall watched as the patrons grew stronger, more confident. He saw the same fire that had kept his squad alive in their eyes. The same stubborn refusal to give up. One night, as they trained, Yila approached. "There's a message coming in. High priority." Marshall took the comm unit, his face hardening as he listened. The pirates were planning a major attack, bigger and more violent than before. They wanted to take control of Talora 9 and turn the station into their base. "They're coming for us," Marshall said quietly. The room grew tense. Every eye was on him, waiting for the next move. "We'll be ready," Marshall promised. "We fight together or we fall apart." The night of the attack arrived. Talora 9 was bathed in red alarms and flashing lights. Marshall stood behind the bar, watching the entrance with cold eyes. The Thunder Blades stormed in, more numerous and better armed than before. Guns blazed, and chaos erupted. But the bar was ready. Traps were sprung. Hidden weapons appeared. The patrons fought back with fierce determination. Marshall moved through the battle like a ghost, fast, precise, and deadly. He disarmed attackers, protected the injured, and fought with the brutal skill that had made Wendigo unit legendary. Ava fought beside him, covering his back with deadly accuracy. Together, they were a storm no enemy could weather. The fight raged for hours. The pirates underestimated the resolve of a bar protected by a warrior who had survived impossible odds. One by one, the attackers fell or fled. The Thunder Blades retreated, beaten and broken. After the battle, the bar was silent except for heavy breaths and the sound of broken glass. Marshall surveyed the damage, fewer broken bottles and chairs than he expected, thanks to the fierce defense. Ava approached, bruised but smiling. "We did it." Marshall nodded, exhaustion heavy on his shoulders. "For now." The patrons gathered around, battered but alive. They looked at Marshall with new respect, not just a veteran or a bartender, but a protector. "You saved us," one merchant said quietly. Marshall shook his head. "We saved each other." In the days that followed, the bar healed. Repairs were made, and the jar for repairs grew fuller than ever. The community had grown stronger, united by fire and survival. Marshall stood behind the bar, pouring drinks with the steady hands of a man who had fought too many battles to count. He looked out over the crowd, feeling a strange peace. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope. Hope that this place, this bar at the edge of nowhere, could be more than just a refuge. It could be a home. The quiet after the storm was fragile, like the thin ice over a frozen lake. Talora 9 felt alive with whispers, rumors spreading through the station like wildfire. The Thunder Blades were licking their wounds, but their hunger for control hadn't faded. They were dangerous and desperate, and everyone knew it was only a matter of time before they tried again. Marshall moved through the bar with the weight of those memories pressing on him. Every scar, every broken bottle, every shouted warning reminded him of the fine line between survival and destruction. But this was his home now, and he was not about to let it fall. Ava was at his side more and more, her pilot armor replaced by a more practical outfit for bar defense and strategy. She was sharp and fierce, but her eyes held a shadow he recognized, a survivor's sorrow. They spoke little about their pasts, but their silence carried understanding. One evening, Yila approached with a grim expression. "A message from the outer docks. The Thunder Blades are gathering reinforcements, ships, weapons, even mercenaries from beyond this sector." Marshall's jaw tightened. "They want to crush us. And they'll try." Marshall nodded slowly. "Then we need to be ready. Not just to fight, but to outsmart them." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Marshall and Ava coordinated defenses, working closely with Grit and the regulars. The bar's reinforced walls became command centers. Communication lines buzzed with updates and warnings. Marshall trained new recruits with military precision. He drilled them in cover, movement, and fighting as a team, lessons burned into him during years of hellish battle. The patrons soaked up every word, their nervousness slowly turning to fierce determination. One afternoon, while surveying the station's perimeter, Marshall ran into an old friend, Rickon. The scientist was studying the structural integrity of the station and the damage from recent fights. You're not just a bartender anymore, are you? Rickon joked. Marshall grunted. Someone's got to keep the peace. Rickon smiled. You ever think about going back to the front lines? To real war? Marshall's eyes darkened. No. This is my war now. Night fell, and the station settled into a tense quiet. Marshall sat alone behind the bar, polishing the same glass he'd carried through countless battles. Memories flooded back, faces lost, promises made, the weight of survival. The door slid open quietly. Ava stepped inside, her expression serious. They're coming, she said softly. Marshall nodded, standing. We fight smart. We protect this place. Together, they checked weapons, set traps, and prepared for the fight to come. The attack began just past midnight. The station shuddered as ships approached, docking bays flooded with enemy soldiers and mercenaries. The funner blades had come with everything, firepower, numbers, and fury. Marshall's bar erupted into chaos. Gunfire echoed through the halls. Alarms blared. But this time, they were ready. Traps ensnared the first wave of attackers. Reinforcements fell into crossfire laid by trained civilians and peacekeepers. Ava coordinated counterattacks with deadly precision. Marshall moved through the fray like a shadow, disarming enemies, pulling fallen comrades to safety, and striking with brutal efficiency. His experience turned the tide. The battle raged for hours, every moment a test of will and skill. The station shook with explosions, but the defenders held their ground. Finally, the enemy faltered. The pirates' confidence cracked. With one last push, Marshall and Ava led a charge that broke the attackers' line. The funner blades retreated, beaten, broken, and humiliated. The aftermath was heavy with loss but also with hope. Talora 9 was scarred but standing. Marshall walked through the wreckage, counting the cost, lives lost, damage done, and the price of survival. The community gathered in the bar, bruised but unbroken. They shared stories, tended wounds, and found strength in each other. Marshall poured drinks with quiet hands. He looked around at faces that had become family, humans and aliens alike bound by shared struggle. Ava stood beside him, her eyes bright with fierce pride. We held the line. Marshall nodded. We did. Together. In the days that followed, repairs began anew. The jar for the bar fund overflowed with credits and kindness. People who had once been strangers now worked side by side, rebuilding not just a bar, but a home. Marshall found himself smiling more. The ghosts of war still lingered, but they no longer ruled him. One evening, as the station's artificial dawn painted the walls with soft light, Ava approached. What now? She asked. Marshall looked out the window at the stars beyond. We keep fighting. Not just pirates, but for a future where this place, and people like us, can survive. She smiled. Then I'm with you. He raised a glass. To survival. To this home. The bar echoed with cheers, a promise made in blood, sweat, and hope. The quiet on Talora 9 was fragile, but it held for a time. The bar stood stronger than ever, a symbol of resistance and hope. Calvin Marshall had become more than a bartender, he was a guardian, a legend whispered in every corner of the station. The stories of Wendigo Unit had grown, and so had the respect for the man who poured drinks with steady hands and fought with deadly precision. One evening, as neon lights flickered softly through the windows, a visitor arrived. She was human but unlike any Marshall had seen in years. Young, fierce, and full of fire, the kind of fire that could burn down worlds or light new paths. Her name was Lena. A pilot and scout from a distant colony, she had heard the stories and come seeking guidance. I want to join, she said simply. I want to fight for places like this, to protect people who can't protect themselves. Marshall studied her quietly. This isn't easy. It changes you. Sometimes you don't come back the same. Lena's eyes didn't waver. I'm ready. Over the following weeks, Marshall took Lena under his wing. He trained her with the same care he had once given his squad. He taught her about survival, loyalty, and the brutal truths of war. Ava remained at his side, a trusted partner in defense and strategy. Together, the three of them prepared Talora 9 for whatever threats might come. The bar was no longer just a refuge, it was a beacon. Aliens and humans alike came seeking shelter, friendship, and a place to rebuild. But peace is often short-lived. One night, the station's alarms screamed, a warning of incoming ships. The Funner Blades were back, larger and more desperate than ever. This time, they had allies, mercenaries from across the galaxy, drawn by greed and bloodlust. Marshall stood at the bar, the weight of years pressing down. He looked at Ava and Lena, the fire in their eyes reflecting his own. "We fight," he said simply. The battle was fierce and brutal. Explosions rocked the station, and the air was thick with smoke and gunfire. Marshall moved through the chaos with practiced skill, a ghost of war past. Lena fought fiercely beside him, her training and courage shining. Ava coordinated defenses with sharp precision, rallying the defenders. Together, they pushed back the attackers, turning the tide with strategy and heart. Hours later, the pirates fled, broken and beaten. Talora 9 had survived once more. In the quiet after the storm, Marshall stood alone behind the bar. He poured himself a drink, earth whiskey, smooth and burning. He thought of his past, the battles, the losses, the friends who never returned. But he also thought of the future, a future forged in this bar, with new allies, new stories, and a new hope. The bar was filled with life and laughter again. The ghosts of war still lingered, but they no longer held power. Marshall raised his glass to the empty room. To survival, he whispered. To home. To the stubborn, the brave, the damned who keep fighting. He drank deeply, the whiskey burning down like fire and ice. Outside, Talora 9 spun quietly through the dark void, carrying dreamers and fighters alike. And inside, a human veteran poured drinks and guarded the fragile peace, a reminder that even in the darkest places, hope could survive.